As of now, it is a very horrible time to become a PC gamer. It seems like everything is ridiculously overpriced or out of stock, which forces you to look at alternatives. Perhaps we might as well all go and buy consoles.
NANI?!
Hey guys, Danny here, welcome back to the channel, hope you've all been doing well. In this video, I wanted to talk about a topic, or rather an issue I briefly touched upon in my previous two videos. Prices of many PC components has been absolutely crazy, because of some developments not only in the PC hardware space, but also in the cryptocurrency market. So in this video, I just wanted to discuss why that's happening, what that means for gamers, and what are some things you can try to do if you are trying to get into the PC gaming scene. When you think of a gaming PC, one of the first things that comes to your mind is, well, it should have a graphics card capable of meeting specific performance targets and criteria. For example, 1080p 60Hz or 1440p with ultra settings, etc. But unfortunately, good luck trying to get one of those because, like I said, they're either out of stock or extremely overpriced. Last year, the Ethereum cryptocurrency had a dramatic spike, which resulted in the return for GPU mining. Back in 2012 and 2013, people were using the older Radeon 7200 series graphics cards to mine Bitcoin, until they finally switched to ASIC miners because the difficulty level had gone up, therefore it just wasn't worth it for them. So last year, people were not just using AMD cards to mine, but they were also starting to use Nvidia's 10 series graphics cards to mine as well. Since AMD stock would be getting depleted and not being able to meet demand, miners were looking for other alternatives, and that was the 10 series Pascal cards, which are also pretty good at mining. But it wasn't just Ethereum that saw a huge increase in its market cap. The whole entire cryptocurrency market went on a wild bull run. The entire market cap increased from $15 billion to a whopping $800 billion US, which is absolutely insane. Then earlier this year, to start off 2018 with a bang, Ethereum hits an all-time high at $1,000. So while it's all sunshine and rainbows in crypto land, the video cards aisle over at your local Canada Computers or Micro Center looks like a depressing abandoned wasteland. Now just a disclaimer here, I have nothing against miners. I can't dictate what you should do with your own hardware and what you shouldn't do with it. If you want to game and mine to make some money on the side, then hey, go for it. In fact, I sometimes do that as well when I know I won't be using my machine for a while. If you want to build a dedicated mining rig composed of 10 Vega 64s or 8 GTX 1080 Ti's, knock yourself out. I'm not going to sit here and say what you're doing is wrong or to give gamers back their graphics cards. Going back to how this impacted the graphics card market, basically any graphics card higher than an NVIDIA GT 1030 or Radeon RX 550 is overpriced and or out of stock. With the current state of the graphics card market, it's unbelievable to see the price tags on these graphics cards. The RX 470, 570, the RX 480, 580, and the GTX 1060, these graphics cards were designed and brought out to the PC market to bring full HD gaming performance and VR to the masses without any compromises. Let's go back a few years and look at the graphics card market in 2014 and 2015. Back then, in order to achieve 1080p 60fps performance with high or ultra settings, the two graphics cards that were always recommended were the GTX 970 and the R9 290 or 390. The GTX 970 retailed for around $330 to $350, and the R9 390 was around the same. This at the time wasn't considered the mainstream price point. For a lot of people, this isn't affordable. Therefore, the majority of PC gamers still weren't able to obtain 1080p 60fps performance using high or ultra settings, and would have to settle for less. Then 2016 came and the Radeon Technologies Group launched the RX 480 and 470, bringing that GTX 970-like performance or 390-like level performance to the masses at lower $150 to $250 price points, which now does get you into that mainstream market segment. So many PC gamers were able to rejoice at being able to much more easily attain and finally enjoy that level of performance, but unfortunately mining has butchered that completely. The RX 580 is going for around $600 to $700 and the GTX 1060 is around $500. That is way higher than what those cards initially launched and sold for in their first year. So we're not back to just 2014 or 2015 levels of pricing relative to gaming performance, but we are far worse off than that. And I find that just to be quite disappointing. We are now living in a market where entry-level gaming graphics cards are being sold at a high-end enthusiast price point. Speaking of high-end, graphics cards like the GTX 1070, 1070 Ti, 1080, and 1080 Ti are in the same state. And you guys can totally forget about AMD's RX Vega graphics cards, because while they may not have impressed gamers, they're total beasts at mining, so they're flying off the shelves regardless of whatever negative things the tech press was saying. GTX 1070s for $800, RX Vega 56, $1,000, and even my GTX 1080 Ti SC Black Edition sells for around $1,300 to $1,500. No gamer in their right mind is going to buy these cards at their current prices. It's not justifiable in any way. If I was trying to get into the PC gaming market right now, I probably would not pursue a build until these prices come back down to earth. And the sad thing is that this market behavior will continue onwards as long as cryptocurrencies and mining remain profitable, which will be the status quo for a very long time. Miners are willing to drop as much money as they can to get their hands on these cards, and it really shows. In fact, even if retailers decide to put buy order limits to 1 per person, it doesn't really matter, as I've heard many large mining operations are buying their cards directly from the main distributive channels, AIBs, etc. I wish there was a solution to all of this, but it's a lot more easier said than done. Nvidia and AMD cannot just go to TSMC and Global Foundries respectively and say, hey, start ramping up production because we need more cards. It's not that simple. And when you have retailers that promote their products based on the mining craze and outright sell DIY kits targeted towards miners, it doesn't really help the situation at all. But nobody should be pointing fingers at anybody. This is just how the economy works. When something is in demand, prices and scarcity will increase, increasing the amount people are willing to pay for a unit. The other issue I wanted to talk about was that it's not just graphics cards which are dramatically increasing in price, but it's also memory and DRAM prices. Taking a look over at PC Part Picker's market trends in the memory section, you can clearly see the increase in prices across all charts. DDR3, DDR4, 8GB, 16GB, 4x4, it doesn't matter, everything has gone up. Anyone building a new PC with the latest parts will be using a motherboard that supports DDR4 memory, and most often those motherboards will be able to support memory overclocking up to 3600 MHz. For a gaming PC, I now recommend 16GB of RAM, as many games are taking advantage of more than 8GB of RAM, plus you are also able to give yourself the headroom to run other programs simultaneously without really hindering much performance. Let's take a look at this memory from Corsair, 16GB total, consisting of two 8GB DIMMs, which can be overclocked out of the box to 3000 MHz, which seems like the sweet spot for memory speed right now, especially if you're building a Ryzen PC. But just take a look at the prices. Over the span of 2 years, the prices have just skyrocketed. Back in June 2016, you could have purchased this kit of RAM for around $70, which is an absolute steal considering where we are today. It seems as though prices jumped at the start of 2017, then remained that way for a while, until we recently started to see them just go out of control these past couple of months. Now you have to pay $200. That's an increase of approximately 185%. There's a few reasons why this happened. For starters, a lot of phone manufacturers started using DDR4 in their flagship smartphones, which caused demand to increase quite a lot. We're also seeing DDR4 implementations in other mobile devices such as tablets and 2-in-1 Ultrabooks. These are devices that are not targeted towards niche markets, but rather the masses. Everyone has a smartphone these days, and unless you're a gamer or content creator, the average person is going to now stay away from a desktop. They would much rather have a more versatile and portable, thin and light Ultrabook. Therefore, the demand of these popular devices is practically linearly correlated to the increase of memory demand. Another reason why RAM prices were affected was because earlier last year we had learned that Samsung and Micron were now starting to produce on a smaller 18nm and 17nm process, shifting away from the industry standard 20nm process. While transitioning to a higher level manufacturing process, they ran into some difficulties such as compatibility issues with some notebooks and higher defect rates, therefore causing a shortage in supply while demand continues to increase. We're also hearing some rumors of all three big players, Samsung, Micron, and Hynix, purposely setting an output which was lower than what was required by the market. This allowed the manufacturers to artificially inflate the prices because of the lower supply. Regardless of whether or not this last point turns out to be true, gamers still have to deal with the reality of having to buy RAM at highly inflated costs, and unfortunately there is nothing you can do about it in this situation. And here's the scary part. You might look at these prices and say, well, that's just too much. $200 for 16GB of RAM? That's just never going to happen. I remember this past summer, my friend was building his Ryzen system and wanted me to recommend him some RAM. So the kit of RAM I recommended to him at the time was around $150. And he said, well, that's pretty high and I'm probably just going to wait until prices come back down to earth. but I highly insisted he buy it now rather than wait, as prices could definitely go up even more and he'll end up paying almost double. Fast forward to 2018 and that same kit of RAM now is $270. If you need to build a system now, you have no choice but to suck it up, unfortunately. Another component I briefly just wanted to take a look at was power supplies. If you take a look at the charts with power supplies of 1000 watts and onwards, you can see that the prices of those units started gradually increasing around June and July of 2017. And this is solely due to miners. Of course, this isn't going to affect gamers because they're not buying 1000 watt or 1500 watt power supplies, but I thought this was just something interesting to point out. It's only miners who really need these kinds of power supplies as they're using multiple graphics cards, but could this possibly lead to a mass shortage of capacitors, thus causing power supplies for the lower end to increase in price? Nah, probably not. Alright, so I talked about how prices on these components seems to be increasing to a point where somebody trying to build a gaming PC targeting 1080p 60 FPS performance is now going to have to pay an absurd amount of money for it. I haven't shown you any examples yet, so let's go through a build I quickly constructed over at PC Part Picker. With this build, I was targeting 1080p 60 FPS performance with high or ultra settings. For the CPU, I picked the Ryzen 5 1400, a quad-core with SMT for those multi-threaded games. A B350 Gigabyte board, which should have pretty much all the essential features you would need in a gaming build, and you would be able to handle some overclocking. For the RAM, I couldn't even get 3000 MHz RAM, so I settled for some 2666 MHz RAM, and that cost about $170. For storage, I always recommend getting a 1TB hard drive for mass storage, and then a smaller SSD dedicated towards your OS and main applications for fast booting and loading times. Then we finally have the graphics card. A Radeon RX 570 with 4GB of VRAM, which should be good for that specific performance target. However, the graphics card alone uses up almost half of our funds, with the case and PSU following afterwards. So with these parts, we're at a grand total of $1,131. That is just crazy. A build like this should really be costing you around $600. Even changing up the build by making some hefty sacrifices by dropping down to a quad core with no SMT, a single 8GB stick running at 2133 MHz, and just using the hard drive alone still doesn't justify the build's price. And I for one would never recommend building a PC like this because you're not getting a solid build. You're just going to be making too many sacrifices, which in the end will be ruining your experience completely. Instead, you're better off sticking to build number 1, taking out the RX 570, and instead dropping in something like an RX 550 and play all your games at 1080p or 900p with low to medium settings. Building a PC right now is just very intimidating and displeasing right now. So what if you just don't want to go through with this headache? Well, that leads me to option number 2. With the current state of the graphics card and memory market, a pre-built system from OEMs like Dell, HP, or Asus can actually be cheaper than building your own custom PC. Yep, you heard that right. The market has gotten to the point where pre-builts are now the smarter buys. I've seen a lot of desperate builders post deals online, and to be honest, there's been quite a lot which have been excellent for their price. You will not be able to build a comparable custom PC with a budget that's equivalent to the price tags of those pre-builds. This Dell Inspiron computer has an AMD R7 1700, 16GB of RAM clocked at 2400 MHz, and an AMD Radeon RX 580 with 8GB of VRAM, all for just $900. So I tried to build a custom PC with a similar configuration, and it cost me around $1,300. Another build that I saw, which I thought was an absolutely fantastic deal, was an HP Pavilion Powerpc with an R5 1400, a 4GB RX 480, and that was all for just $630. Both of those pre-builds are better than the 2 builds that I could come up with the current state of the market. Guys, I know that there are some of you out there who absolutely despise pre-builds for your own personal reasons maybe, or because they don't often offer good upgrading capabilities, their cases suck, or that their power supplies just barely meet the system's required spec. But I'd be willing to put up with this rather than pay for my own custom PC with several compromises made to it and still end up overpaying by like $300 or $400. It's a no-brainer right now. These pre-builds are definitely a viable way to go if you're tired of looking around and waiting for deals. Now, option number 3, consoles. Honestly, picking up a console in these times may not be a bad idea. The Xbox One X is a great system, has an awesome library of games, and can even run some games at 4K. Although maybe not at native 4K, but it will still deliver a pretty good experience, and plus you can use it as a streaming box for Netflix and Hulu and things like that. I personally picked up a Nintendo Switch a few months ago, and I've been really enjoying myself with it. Nintendo's first-party games are so much fun. I spent the first month just playing Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and I didn't even touch my PC for my gaming needs during that month. So it's not the end of the world because you couldn't build yourself a gaming PC. Well guys, that pretty much wraps up what I wanted to say in regards to the state of the PC gaming market. I hope that it does get better soon. When will that be? As of now, I couldn't really give you an answer, but just stay strong. There are alternatives out there. If you guys found this video to be informative and helpful, then leave a like. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, and if you're interested in watching more videos like this, then make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for watching guys, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.